Hello, and welcome back to Art and Code Homemade. My name is Golan Levin. I'm professor of electronic art at Carnegie Mellon University and director of the Frank Ratchey Studio for Creative Inquiry. And this is the third and final day of Art and Code Homemade 2021. The Art and Code Festival Series is concerned with democratizing the cultural and creative potentials of emerging technologies. We have a Discord server to support community conversations, by the way, if you're watching this, and if you're interested in participating in those chats, we ask you to please register at artandcode.com, which is our festival website. And you can specifically go to artandcode.com/homemade/register to receive the link for the Discord chats. It's a pandemic, it's winter, we're quarantined in our rooms, and the world is in turmoil. How can we stay vitally creative and connected at this moment? We present Art and Code Homemade, a free online festival featuring inspirational talks by creators we admire who work with digital tools and crafty approaches to make things that preserve the magic of something homemade. Art and Code Homemade has been made possible by an award from the Media Arts Program of the National Endowment for the Arts, by the Sylvia and David Steiner Speaker Series at Carnegie Mellon University, and by support from generous donations to the Directors Fund at the Frank Ratchey Studio for Creative Inquiry. This morning, it's my terrific pleasure to introduce Cyril Diagne. He's a Paris-based interaction designer and creative coder, specialized in the application of machine learning and computer vision to human-computer interaction. He's a co-creator of ClipDrop, an augmented reality app for cutting and pasting between physical and digital worlds. Cyril Diagne.
Thank you, Goran. A few words about myself. I've always been a bad student. This is my final grade at the French Baccalaureate. I had 3 out of 20, which is really bad. I know that folks in the US use a different notation system, A, B, C, D, F. So to sort of give a common ground, if we apply this ratio to a keyboard, this is the keys that you're left with. So I've always been a bad student. This was sort of really my own native language, the French test. I got 3 out of 20. I felt like, okay, normally the path is you're a good kid, you have good grades, and you have a good job. I failed at the first 2. There was no way I would get a good job. So I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna be an artist because I guess that's the only thing that's left. So I did that. I learned how to code and became an artist at the art collective Lab 212 in France, which was a phenomenal experience. We got to create interactive installations that we exhibited around the world. This is my very first project in the collective called POP, for People on Pop, in 2009, with young school students from the Meknes School in Morocco. And we created this installation that lets you take a pose from a choreographer, take a picture when you reach that pose, and add it to a collective video dance. And just with the theme homemade, this shows how we recorded the choreography. Because I was so broke, I had a blue roll of screen, but the shop didn't have blue, they only had green, and I literally only had the money to buy 1 roll. So I had the brilliant idea, it's no problem, I'll just put both together and I'll key both colors. Of course, if you've done video keying, you know how stupid an idea that was, and you can imagine the pain I had to key that video. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter so much. It was painful, but it worked, and it was enough to get started. And for about 7 years, I just did that, really, hacking around at home, This here you can see my former home. For the quick anecdote, because rent in Paris is so expensive, I didn't have space for a lab, so I had to get rid of my couch. So I didn't have a living room. I only had a lab instead of the living room, but it was just so fun. Every day, just going on about whatever felt interesting at the time, not worrying if it fit any boxes, if it was going to be able, if I would be able to exhibit this, to show it even, didn't really matter. It was just about hacking all day long and exchange ideas with the friends of the collective and see if what we could be done with it. And strangely and ironically, just by doing that, eventually led me to an academic job, because the ECAL, the University of Design in Lausanne, Switzerland, offered me the role of a professor and to lead the Bachelor of Media and Interaction Design, which felt absolutely crazy because, as I mentioned, I've always been a bad student, but they said, actually, this kind of practice is what we do in the Bachelor. So I was a bit skeptical at the beginning, but then I realized that it's true. It's really the way that the Bachelor is sort of structured and the way that students go about creating and understanding and yes, creating knowledge on the field of media and interaction design, which is extremely hands-on, really, yes, hands-on, a practical approach to interaction design. So I had 3 wonderful years there. This is one project that I really like, which we exhibited at the Milan Design Fair, which is When Objects Dream. So here the students turned objects of everyday life and tried to explore what could be their inner life and how we could get a peek on that inner life. But then, so it was wonderful, and it reconciliated me with academia, but I fell in love. I fell in love, both literally and figuratively. Literally because I got married that year, and my wife were doing long distance. She was in Paris, and we thought it'd be nice to live together. So I moved back to France, to Paris, and figuratively because, okay, I felt that was an ambitious connection to make, I realize now. I fell in love with AI. I fell in love with AI. I think that was in 2014. I saw the Inception paper, and really the same way that I felt when I saw code and I felt how it was going to change the world and completely change my life, I felt the same thing with AI. I felt that same spark again, that this is going to be incredibly important. And so I was lucky. Oh yes, this shows an example from a beautiful paper from Sean Carter and Michael Nielsen that sort of goes through how AI can help create more natural interaction with content and with data. So this really shows strikingly how user interfaces are going to be transformed by this technology. And yes, I was lucky to enter a very long residency of 6 years at the Google Arts and Culture Lab, which I just stopped in December. And I was able to focus entirely on that. So that was really, really, really nice. And of course, some crazy unexpected things happened. For instance, showing my hacky open frameworks visualization of artworks to Steven Spielberg and James Cameron at TED. It's a bit random, but it happened. So that was really, yes, really an unexpected journey through the corporate world of big FANG companies. I was able, at the Google Arts and Culture Lab, as I mentioned, I was able to really apply machine learning to interaction design. This is a project called Portrait Matcher, which is very similar to Sharing Faces from Kyle MacDonald, but here applied to artworks. And it was fun, it was nice, but it felt a little bit gimmicky, a little bit, the connection with the artworks was a bit shallow, and I've wanted to see if there was a way to create a deeper connection with artworks and using the face. And so that was in 2015. The FaceNet paper was out, but there was no public implementation of it. But being at Google, I was able to use their internal implementation because it's Googlers who made this paper. And so it was crazy. I was able to just put the artworks, all the artworks of Google Arts and Culture through the model, get the embeddings, and then do nearest neighbor search, from any image. And it was mind blowing. The results we were getting I was absolutely shocked by some of the connections that it would make, and not just on portraits, but on any image that would only person that would appear on an artwork. So that was pretty insane. And I realized that as I was showing, people were sending me their pictures, and they would ask me to send them their match. The more I would send back, the more would come. And at the time, I had to do them one by one manually on a notebook, on a Jupyter notebook. And it became quite obvious that people were creating a super strong connection with whatever match they were getting. And it was quite amazing that this project actually became public and became a feature within the Google Arts and Culture app, which became viral and pushed the app as #1 on all the stores. It was pretty insane. Now, I think that was in 2018. And of course, there's been many developments, and it's still crazy to me today that despite all the crazy issues that were present in that app, in that feature, that it still managed to get sort of a positive narrative attached to it. Of course, thanks, in part, I would say, thanks to this proxy, it helped foster the conversation on all the issues that it had. And I wouldn't think that the same thing would happen again today, but I was lucky, I guess, sort of a lucky moment to have released that project. But anyway, I won't go too long on this. We did many experiments that are accessible on the experiments website. But then I started to feel a lack, something that was really missing, and that was increasingly painful, which was the agency, being able to choose and to bring a project to light. For instance, this is one example that I still to this day find absolutely delightful and I adore, which is a watch face that shows you dancers that match the position of the watch hands. And it was a bit strange that I felt no one really cared to make this app public. And yeah, it made me feel this lack of agency that you have in the corporate world, where, of course, there are gatekeepers. And it reminded me of all the issues I had at school with people that are not necessarily the people who the artwork is for, but still being the one to judge if they're going to get to see it at all. And I felt wrong. And so that coincided, this realization, with the lockdown. And it was an opportunity to force myself to create independent prototypes and research that would only fulfill my own interests. And so I set up this sort of structure where I would, in maximum 1 week, but as it turns out, most of the projects I show were done over the weekend, but there would be this hard limit of 1 week in order to be able not to even think if what I'm doing makes any sense. But the goal is really the sprint. Someone who sprints doesn't stop in the middle to think if he's going fast or not. He just goes and look back after. This is why I don't like the idea of a 2-week sprint, which happens a lot in corporate, because I think it sort of fails the purpose to have this weekend break in the middle. So no, maximum 1 week. And the most important thing is no pause. You go as far as you can, you go to the end, and after you look back and you realize, oh, what have I done? This is stupid. I should absolutely not show that. Or the opposite, you are like, well, now that it's done, you know what? Anyway, let's just show it and maybe it will interest someone. And this exact process has changed my life, and maybe it can change yours too. So yes, the process was very simple and tuned toward AI plus interaction design. So you basically mix one model, plenty available on Paper with Code, GitHub, a data set. So again, you have visual data, you have Google dataset search, plenty of freely accessible data sets available, and an integration. So the integration, you come up with your own sort of experience and culture, and whether it's an app, a tool, a website, whatever, a physical object, an piece of electronics, whatever. But then these three sort of spark an experiment idea, then you can process it and fine tune a model using this unique mix with this unique mix as intent. And then you can deploy the model and share a demo, and very importantly, share it. If you feel like there is no risk of causing harm with what you've done, at least this is what I was applying. If there is no risk to cause harm, then I shouldn't try to judge too hard. I should share it and let other people find maybe something that would resonate with them, including the code, because of many sort of the reason of why this research existed was thanks to open source. So it was absolutely critical to make all those prototypes open source. So this is one example called Instagram 3D Chrome extension that was done in a weekend, but just applying the 3D photography using context-aware layered depth impainting paper from CVPR 2020 to Instagram. So using this super hackish way where you don't need a GPU because it's using Colab, you can have a Chrome extension that turns all images on Instagram in 3D automatically. So I felt this was an interesting way to sort of revisit existing content. Here, the beautiful photos of Martin Parr. This was another example of a weekend experiment again. Face doodle using MediaPipe. So here, this ongoing obsession with the face and face and interacting with your face, but here being able to just doodle and draw simple shapes and colors on your face. This just shows a little bit of how it works. But again, just using open source technologies, one of the most beautiful things for me about open source is that you don't need permission. This is such a underestimated aspect of open source, which is that because there is no price, because there is no license, because there is no contact us button to get to the trial, you just get the code, you don't ask permission to anybody, you just get going. And I find that extremely powerful. And for the anecdote, it can have such unexpected ripple effect. I mean, I don't think Golan Levin knew that he was going to change my life, me, Cyril, in France, when he zipped a few C++ files and sent them over to Zach Lieberman. And yet, this is just the way this code goes when it's open source. This is another example, freestyle flip detection using TensorFlow.js, so running in the browser. Here, the idea was to do a sort of a juggling game where you could play with your phone without looking at your screen. So it was a bit short in a weekend. I didn't finish it, but I managed to do a sort of functioning prototype, sort of. But it was fun. And then there was this one, AR copy paste. Just so you know, but I'll let you see the video. But just so you know, for me, this was really one prototype like the other. I thought it was cool because otherwise I wouldn't have made it. But for me, it wasn't something particularly different from the other. It was just, another weekend. Started on Friday at home using whatever equipment I had, and released the video on Sunday. So really homemade, extremely scrappy. The code is open source. You can see how badly coded it is, but it worked, and it resonated with the folks who got to see it online. This is a little bit how it works. So using SIFT, I won't go into too much technical detail, but using OpenCV, it's possible to know where the phone is pointing at, which location of the screen the phone is pointing at. And using, I'll go on this, using here, the prototype was using BASNet, a model from Huibin Qin and other researchers from the University of Alberta. It's possible to detect which pixel of an incoming image are part of the main subject and which ones are part of the background. Using a convolutional neural net, sort of a UNet, and combining the two, it's possible to create fairly easily to create this this tool, this app that can copy anything around you and paste it directly in whatever tool you're using at whichever location you need it. So the cool thing is that it reduces, even in the best scenario, if you have AirDrop, you know, so it means you have an iPhone, you have a Mac, you have everything set up. It requires 11 operations. With this, it requires 2 operations. And the crazy things again happen, which is that the world took notice, and even academia took notice, because I got my first paper on arXiv. Remember, I'm a bad student, so it's a bit weird, and even invited to talk during the Black in AI workshop at NeurIPS, which is an extremely formal academic conference, the opposite of this one. And so it's really, yes, the world reacts in unexpected ways. And it's, you know, another anecdote for that is Lab 212. We only started exhibiting in France once we got international recognition. So, and we're like, guys, we've been there the whole time. What took you so long? But it's this thing that people will look somewhere else, maybe for external forms of validation, but it shows the benefits of not being in only one place. And yes, the world took notice. The prototype went kind of viral. It showed up in all many blogs, and my neighbor came and was like, oh, guy, what's happening? I see your name on LinkedIn. I don't understand. It really blew out of proportions. And because the code was open source, people were able to tweak it and turn it into their own version. Here is one of my favorite examples: is someone making cocktails from the photos that they find online. So here, margaritas with what I guess is a margarita machine. I didn't know that existed, but apparently. So I found that super cool. And I would have definitely never had the idea to make that. That's another beauty of open source. Oops. Now with everything that gains public visibility, of course, you get the trolls come. And interestingly, with this project, the trolls were coming with the idea that it's fake, that it was a fake video done in 3D. And the crazy thing was, some arguments seem to really make sense. I mean, I'm like, no, objectively, if I had not filmed my prototype myself, and I just read this comment saying that video, I could believe this. It's fairly elaborate. And so there was two things, 2 routes. Either I would fight online with every single one of them, and it would have led nowhere, or I could just make it public, an app that anyone can test and see that it actually works. And so thanks to the help of Jonathan Blanchet and Damien Henry, 2 friends, we turned it into a public app. So something that started extremely scrappy in a weekend hack, just because why not, pretty much, became an app that people were actually using in their workflows. And it's being used by hundreds of thousands of people, which is still crazy to me, because as I mentioned again, it didn't start with this sort of grand vision. It was a small, fun prototype amongst many. But and it keeps going on, because now we are a team of 6 people, because a product requires a company, and this company, because now we have so many aspects going on, we need help. So we are 6, and we've joined a startup accelerator called Y Combinator. So in pretty much all aspects, we are effectively in a startup now, which is, again, really funny, because it's never been a dream of mine to become an entrepreneur. Even, I would say, I would have a kind of a negative view, maybe a bit negative view on the startup world. So it's crazy to realize that, but now effectively I'm in a startup. So it's quite funny. And again, it's unexpected, and it kind of doesn't make sense. But at the end of the day, as long as I feel you know, my integrity, personal convictions are maintained. Why not? And okay, now I realize that this transition is a bit harder than I thought with Marco Polo, but okay, do I have time? A little bit of time. So the idea is, it's never been that easy to change life. Our environment shapes us in many ways. Of course, the physical, the environment, the cultural environment shapes us in many ways. And in many cases, this can be limiting for creativity, for expressing ourselves and who we are. And especially during lockdown, a huge part of that environment is digital. And it's incredibly easy to change your life digitally. You remove a few apps, you install a few other, you unfollow some people, you follow some others, and that's it. You've changed life. You don't need anymore to go like Marco Polo, go through the Silk Road, which at the time is an insane idea. You have to leave your family, you have to radically change so many things. But then he came back from that journey with with the first Western writings on coal, porcelain, gunpowder. So all these incredible things that he found back then, to have these crazy stories, to have these crazy adventures, you had to give up on many things. Right now, you don't have to give up on so many things. You can entirely change your life by just switching tabs. So I guess my point is that because our environment shapes us in so many ways and can limit us so strongly, and because it is so easy to radically change this environment, it seems like there are a lot of incentives to try. And if that's just 1 week and see how it feels, for me, it has changed my life. So yeah, maybe it can change yours too. Thank you. And I guess now we have time for question, if there are any questions. I'll see if I can see the Discord or if Golan has questions.
Thank you so much, Cyril. This was an amazing presentation, full of a lot of ideas. We're a tiny bit short on time, and there's a lot of questions that are in the Discord for you. Many people are asking, you know, how do you get your ideas, and where do you keep a notebook, and you know, how do you navigate social media and virality? Because it seems like you're not just good at coming up with ideas, but you're good at coming up with ideas that have viral potential. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask you to maybe talk to folks in the chat, because we have to get our next speaker on deck.
Yeah,
and but this was a great presentation, full of, I know I'm going to really think about this notion of a sprint really having to go within 1 week. I think that's super important, because the break of the weekend changes things. Thank you so much. And everyone, we're going to resume in just a couple minutes with Lee Wilkins. There's a lot of clapping on the Discord. Thank you so much, Cyril. And I'll see you in 2 or 3 minutes for Lee Wilkins.
Thank you.